So a little bit about me, if I can get my slides to behave. So before I was a computer geek, I was an anthropologist, which very much colors the way I do my job on a daily basis. In 1994, when I decided to leave grad school, I looked at my set of skills and thought, maybe this computer thing might go somewhere. And interestingly, when I made that decision, I thought I was walking away from anthropology, but in fact, it still chases me. A lot of things that I learned about how to interact with people definitely drive how I do my work and how I interact with folks in the software industry. So speaking of which, I've been in the industry for 26 years. I've been through 8 companies, possibly more. There were a couple of shady moments there where I wasn't sure if I was working for a company or not. I worked with startups for a long time, and as you know, they're pretty ephemeral. So sometimes you're not sure if you're with a company or not. Anyway, my current gig is that I am a staff engineer with the quality control team at NWEA, which means that I look at higher level quality issues across the company, which is it's a fun job, and I just really love it. And as an aside, you can probably see from the picture, I do equestrian sports. That's my horse JLo and I at a competition carrying a flag. So anyway, side note. So moving on. This paper all started as the result of a root cause analysis my team was asked to do. We were having a lot of data quality errors, and we were trying to figure out what was driving them. And on our first pass through, we came up with a lot of superficial reasons. But then when we really dug into we took the next level and really dug in, we discovered that these errors were basically the result of a hurry culture that our development team had created. It was the entire development department. We had been urged to just get things done. And in order to get things done, we started cutting corners. And we did it all the time. And as a result, we were reaping the whirlwind. So once we figured out that this was a culture issue, we had to ask ourselves, is this the culture we want? Or should we have a different culture? And the bottom line here is that both answers are correct. But the trick is that if you want to have a hurry culture, then you need to support it. You can't have a culture and not support that culture with processes and behaviors. So once I started to think about that, then things got out of control and I started writing my ideas down. So let's take a step back. What is culture? And to us, culture is essentially everything. I found this cute little graph, and it's what we eat, it's how we relate to each other, it's how we pick our mates, what we believe in. It's part of our everyday lives because of the way we interact with each other. We are very much culture driven, and every society is that way. If you think about the handshake, that's something we take for granted, but it's a part of our culture. And something I've been watching as sort of from my anthropologist lens is how we're dealing with the fact that during a pandemic, we can't shake hands anymore. And people are trying to figure out, what to do about that thing. Do you elbow bump? Do you do a bow? Do you do a toe touch? Or maybe at some point when this whole COVID thing does get under control, maybe we go back to a handshake. But you don't realize how deeply ingrained it is in your culture until you just can't do it anymore. So given how important culture is, you have to think about the fact that in a team, if you don't specifically create a culture will evolve on its own, and you may not get the culture that you want. So it's super important to pay attention to what you've got and whether that's what you want or not. So in my experience, these are examples. These are some of the cultures I've run into over the years. And, the kind of culture you have is very specific to your company. There are as many kinds of cultures as there are adjectives in the dictionary. The ones I've worked with, clearly the hurry up culture, which I just talked about, where, you get it out on time, no matter what. If you have to, you cut corners. You leave yourself tech debt, you just get it done and get it out. A culture that I've always been fascinated by is what I call the careful culture, or the NASA culture. And this is a culture that you tend to see, space industries, the medical industry, financial, anywhere where it's a highly regulated industry where people's lives are on the line. Like I said, I love NASA because if you look at their documentation of their testing processes, it's a huge book. Every step is carefully documented. If something goes wrong, there's always forensic folks are brought in to analyze the situation and figure it out. And interestingly, when NASA gets away from its culture, every time it gets away from its culture, something bad happens. Both Columbia and Challenger were a direct result of a shift away from being careful in favor of hurrying up, just getting that launch out the door and on time. And in doing so, they neglected to listen to their experts, and bad things happened. So that's a little, an anecdote about staying true to your culture. The next one is the better than average culture. And this is one that I think we've all worked in. I think a lot of organizations are this way. Everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody does everything they can to do a good job. And they get the job done. There are defects, and that happens. But everybody, on the average, works really hard and does a pretty good job. And you're probably not going to, break the world with your amazing new ideas, but you're going to release a lot of really, really good software. The innovator die. These guys are, that's essentially your startup culture, where, you've got your angel money, you've got to kick some butt and take some names to get your software out. Every time somebody has an idea, they get it out there. Everybody talks about it, and you make intelligent decisions, but you do it very quickly. And it's an amazing culture to work in, except that you can't do it for more than a year, and usually, oftentimes, 6 months or so, because people just burn out. It's high energy. You're there, 8, 10, 12 hours. Well, yeah, 10, 12, 16 hours a day, as many hours as it takes to get the job done. And you're going to ship some really cool stuff really quickly. But again, you got to be careful, or else you're just going to implode. The last one is, of course, the purist culture. And I've actually seen this one. It's kind of fun. It's also kind of scary. These are the guys that, or the folks that they totally believe in what they're doing. They want everything to be absolutely perfect. They're willing to build their own operating systems and their own development platforms, because the development platforms that are available aren't good enough. So instead of working with those folks, the people that build the development platforms to get it right, they just build their own. This is where some of your most interesting innovations come from, but it's also a corporate model that usually isn't very successful. When these guys ship software, it's absolutely perfect, but it's expensive. It's hugely expensive. It takes a long time to get out. So if you don't find these guys inside of a startup, you're going to find them in a think tank inside of bigger companies like, Intel or HP. They're your R&D guys. So anyway, like I said, these are just examples. I'm sure everybody has worked in variants of these cultures, or cultures that are entirely differently. So moving on. So you're in a team, an established team, and you may not have a formal culture, in which case you have to take a step back and try to figure out what it is that your culture is made of. And as I say here, introspection is key. What is valued? What is your company value? What is your team value? And what gets rewarded? Part of the way we accidentally built our hurry culture was we started rewarding. We rewarded successful fast releases. So every time we got one out the door on time, we got gift cards, we got vacation time, we got awards and praise. And so that encouraged that whole hurry up methodology. And it got to the point where that in our minds, that was the only option, was get it done. Even if we could say no, we didn't say no because we conditioned ourselves to believe that no wasn't an option because we got to get it done. And that's how deeply ingrained that need to hurry was within our development team. So think about that. What do you get? How do you reward? What do you reward? Who gets the rewards? And what are they being rewarded for? So once you figure that out, put a name on it. And this name can really be a touchstone. It should reflect the culture. You can see the hurry culture or the careful culture, or maybe we want a quality culture, quality at all costs. But whatever name you put on it, it should be realistic and it should be honest. Don't sugarcoat what your culture is. And especially don't sugarcoat it if you don't like it, because it can act as a reminder of a place you don't want to go back to. We call ours the hurry culture. And then, we ask ourselves, is this a hurry culture behavior? Use that as a reminder, if we're doing it right, great. And if we're doing it wrong, is it reminiscent of this culture that we want to get away from? And if you do have a culture that you're not satisfied with, think about what the culture that you want to have and put a name on that. Maybe you aspire to be the quality culture. Fabulous. Or maybe you aspire to be a caring culture where, everything you do is about making sure that the folks on your team are happy. Whatever culture it is you want to have, give it an aspirational name and work towards that. And then when you're doing activities around building culture and just in general, you can ask yourself this question, does this reflect the culture I want to have? Does this reflect my quality culture? Or does this reflect my hurry culture? How is this decision going to help or take away from the culture I want to have? So, and that's the next bit here. When you do figure out your culture, did you get what you were expecting? Or did you get a surprise? Good surprise, bad surprise? And that's important. If your culture is not what you want it to do, then change it. And if it's good, we'll talk about how to support that here in a minute. The other thing, does your culture mesh with your team goals? Maybe you have goals around shipping products fast, but your culture is very careful. Well, that's kind of a mismatch. So that's something that you want to deal with. Another thing to think about is your product. What if you build heads-up displays for airplanes? That's one of those times where you really want to have a culture that's based around care and taking the time to do it right. Because if you have a culture around hurrying it up and shipping it, and you ship a heads-up display that fails on a plane, clearly that's not going to end well. So make sure that whatever culture you have is appropriate for the kind of product you're producing. Maybe you build websites. Okay, fabulous. That's a great culture. That's a great place to have kind of a hurry up culture, because usually when you're building web content, the people you're building it for, they want it as fast as possible. They want changes implemented as quickly as possible. And if you don't get something 100% right, it's quick and easy to fix. So that's a perfect place to have a more hurry style culture. So if you found that you've either built a culture or you have a culture that you really love, you've got to protect it. And it sometimes can be really difficult, but it's worth it. I think I talk about in the paper that culture is like a hot house flower. You've got to kind of nurture it and love it along. And if you don't, it's going to die, or it's going to mutate into something that you're not happy with. So you've got to ensure that the work coming into your team is culture appropriate. And you've got to empower the members of your team to kick it back in a constructive way when the work that comes in isn't right. So let's just say, for instance, that you have a culture based on being careful and doing really, really strong quality work. And, marketing asks you for a huge project with a short turnaround and a high probability of fail. Well, that's when you've got to step in and kick that back, to the business team. You've got to negotiate with them, because if you accept that project in for your team to work on, they're going to look at it and say, well, this is crap. This is not what we signed up for. We signed up to take our time and do it right. We didn't sign up to push crap out the door. So you have to be aware of that. One of my favorite ways to negotiate with business is to present a menu. We can take our time and ship it the way we want it, and it's not going to come in when you want it, but it's going to be really good when it gets there. Or, yeah, we can ship it when you want it, but you're not going to get everything you asked for. So pick your favorites, and maybe you present a couple of different options, or you negotiate about the options that you want. Or, okay, fine, we're shipping it on time, and you guys are supporting it because we're not going to. But you have to release yourselves from that, not necessarily the responsibility, but you can tell the business, yeah, we're going to do it, but we're not going to stand behind this because this is not part of us. This is not how we do business, and this is not how we want to do business. And if you do those things, your team's going to feel that like you're supporting them. And I've been there. I've been on the wrong side of that, where we've said we want to do good work, and it gets shipped anyway. And it's really disheartening. It's soul crushing when that goes out and it fails in production, and they come back and they say, well, why did this fail? We told you it was going to fail. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think we were lying? And that's what happens when your culture and your processes just don't align with each other. So you might not have, if you don't have a culture that you want, or if you don't have a culture at all, you're just starting up for the first time, that's the funnest time, the most fun time to charter. Or if your team has gotten really stale, that's another great time to charter. And what a chartering is it's an exercise where you dig in and you figure out how you as a team want to do business, and what you want to work on and what you care about. And I should start with the disclaimer that a lot of this was taken directly from Diana Larson. I wish I was as cool as she is. I actually got to take a training from her on chartering several years ago, and it was really helpful, kind of mind-blowing in spots, and I learned a lot. So anyway, having said that, when you charter, it can really help align your team with the rest of the company. Or it can figure out, if you're doing it at a company level, it can help your company figure out what they want to be, and what they care about. So it's a great process. So you start, and I should say, I'm just going to give you a subset of the whole chartering process. If you do the whole thing, it can take a whole day. It can take 2 days. It needs to take as long as it takes to really dig in and get the right answers. Over the years, I've pared my chartering process down to what I think are the most valuable parts. You may or may not agree. In my paper, I actually have a link to Diana's site where she explains the whole process. I would super duper encourage you to go have a look at that, because you will find it enlightening. Anyway, so if you decide you want to charter, you start with a purpose, what the team wants to do. And that is, it's always couched within what the team has been mandated to do. Clearly, if you work for a heads-up display company, you can't decide that you want to build video encoder software. It's just not, So everything is always couched within what your team has been assembled to work on in the first place. And the first thing you do is you start by creating a vision statement, which is a future ideal state. So, for example, our customers are able to download widgets easily to add to their software, and the widgets are perfect every time. That's, it's where you want to be. It's not necessarily where you are now. Interestingly, in trying to come up with the vision statement, it's really, really likely that you'll come up with several mission statements as a result. Hold on to those, because you will use those in your next, section, which is establishing a mission statement. So once you've got your vision, clearly you move on to the mission. And the mission is the what and the how. The mission statement for the company I work for, NWEA, is partnering to help all kids learn. Super simple, but it's the what, which is helping kids learn, and the how, which is we're going to partner to do it. So we're going to work with our partners and figure out how to help kids learn. The last step is the mission test, which is how do you know that what you're doing is actually working? It's proof that it's actually happening. So these are a series of tests that help prove that. So for instance, if you were working off of mission tests for NWEA, you might come up with something like the kids' test scores improve 10 points every quarter. That helps you know that you're getting it done. Or teachers are able to explain to their students how to get better, but they should be defined tests that are in fact measurable in some way or provable. They can't be too ethereal, because how do you know if you're feeling better about life in general? It's hard to measure that. So anyway, oh, by the way, Stephen, if anybody has any questions in chat, do let me know. I can be interrupted. I promise. I won't lose my business entirely. So the next step, hang on just a second. Once you've established your purpose, the next piece is alignment, which is how the team actually wants to work together, how you want to do business. And you start by coming up with shared values. And these are the values that your team wants to uphold. Things like honesty, integrity, precision. It's usually a single word, maybe two. It's not complicated, but it's the things that you as a team care about. Maybe speed is important, maybe quality is super important, you would hope. But whatever it is, make a list of those values. And then for each value, come up with some simple rules that support them. Maybe quality is one of your shared values. Fine. Then you have a simple rule. We will not sacrifice quality for anything. Or maybe honesty is important. We'll always tell the truth even when it's painful. Just simple rules that help you figure out, how to honor the values that you've decided are important. And then the last step here is working agreements. These are statements that clearly describe how the team wants to do their daily business. So things like maybe you're all located in the same office, in which case you can have a rule like no meetings before 9 a.m. Or maybe our PO will always bring donuts at the conclusion of a successful planning. The thing to be wary of, though, is setting all of these up in a way that is inappropriate. So, for example, maybe you have a team, maybe half of your team is in the United States and half of your team is in Sri Lanka or India or somewhere else in the world, in which case the 9 o'clock meeting rule doesn't work for them. It's not fair. So, make sure that your rules are appropriate for your team, no matter where it is, and no matter how they work together. Maybe if one of your values is honesty, you might have a working agreement around, we'll be honest in an honorable way, or we will be honest but not, I don't know, leverage that honesty to make someone else uncomfortable. We won't be honest to the point of making people uncomfortable. But things like that. Anyhow, hopefully that makes sense. And I apologize, I've got a lot of content, so I'm kind of speeding through this. So definitely, if you have questions, ask. But we're almost there. So last, aligning tools, processes, and teams. So you've got a culture. Now you got to put your money where your culture is. All your tools and all your processes should be appropriate for your culture. If you're all about fast releases, then put your money in CI/CD tools, and put your money in support folks. Because if you're doing fast releases, you're going to probably have defects, and you want a big enough support team that's trained well enough to really support these releases and to help your customers through stuff. If you're a quality culture, then you're going to put your money in quality tools. Having the tools to make your QA team successful, and your developer team successful, so that your releases are as high of a quality as they can be. Or maybe you are the purist culture, in which case you're going to spend all your money on people, because you're going to need people to build all the platforms and the software tools because they want to do it themselves. But whatever your culture is, that's where you're going to spend your money. And again, the processes should also be appropriate, which I sort of talked about. If you're a quality software, if you're all about quality, then you're going to have a lot of quality processes. If you're about speed, CI/CD. And then the rest of your company has to be in on this too. You can't just have your culture be isolated to your development team. Your marketing has to understand what you're up to. If you are a hurry culture and you do releases all the time, then your marketing team knows to make small promises that can be easily fulfilled. Your support team, again, your support's ramped up. They're ready to deal with your customers. They know to tell your customers, I've reported this bug. Our turnaround time is usually 12 to 24 hours. So you'll see something really soon. Sales is the same way. HR, if your HR team is on board, they're going to hire people that thrive in that kind of high-paced environment. And the same with your IT people. If they know that, you're uploading new patches all the time, they're going to manage their processes to support yours. So if your entire company is on the same page, it makes the machine work more smoothly. If you do fast releases and your marketing team is out there promising, huge fixes or huge products, that's not going to work, because everybody's going to be out of sync. It's just kind of simple. You don't promise what you can't deliver. And if they do promise what you can't deliver, then people are going to get frustrated. Oh, marketing just promised something we can't possibly do. How are we going to pull this off? And now you've got your engineers angsting over something they can't do. So ultimately, if everybody's on the same page, that's where you're going to be successful. And I just had a little anecdote in here. I went looking for the graphic that I've got up there in the corner, and I typed success into Google. Every single picture it came up with was the sun, holding hands in the sun, or children dancing in the sun. I don't know why, but apparently you can't have success without the sun, which, from an astronomy point of view makes sense, because without the sun, we're all hosed. But I don't know. I thought it was funny. But as I already talked about a little bit, if everybody's on the same page with your culture, your releases are going to be smoother. Your quality is going to be appropriate. Something I didn't touch on as much as I should have is, if you are doing fast releases, your quality may not be, super high, but that's okay, because your turnaround time is fast and you can fix things as fast as you can find them. Or if you do have a very careful culture, your quality is going to be a lot higher because you're taking months and months and months to get it right. So, the important thing is that everything is appropriate to each other. Again, if you're in a place where you do releases once a year, as long as that release is nearly perfect, your customers are going to be happy because they know they're going to get a quality piece of software and they're going to get hand-holding to get it installed. And then once it's all done, they don't have to touch it again for a year. And that can make your customers really happy. And, finally, employee retention. If your people are in tune with your culture, they're not going to be looking. That's the moment when we all start looking, is that last, this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. One more time, sales has promised something that, we're going to be here till 1 a.m. every night for 6 weeks to get this done. And that's when you just type your resume into Glassdoor or whatever and just, something's got to be better than this. So when everything is aligned, your folks aren't going to go looking for greener pastures because the pasture they've got's pretty good. So anyway, I know I buzzed through all of that, but thank you for coming to listen. Everybody loves baby animal pictures, so there you go. So you'll remember me fondly because I showed you baby animal pictures. I wanted to thank my PNSQC editors because they really worked hard to help make sure that my product was good. And my poor husband, who's a horseshoer, he really kind of doesn't know what I do other than computer stuff. So he just puts up with all this, and I'm super thankful. And actually, honestly, I'm thankful to all of you for coming and listening. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Heather. We have a few questions in here, and
cool.
Appropriate shirt. Moss asked, thinking about Eric's keynote, should your charter be responsive to the business's goals? That is, if your business wants good enough, but your goal is quality at any cost, how does the team adjust? I know you talked a little about that, but
yeah, and I think if they're that far out of sync, if your marketing team, your business, and your development team are so far out of sync, then I think there needs to be a negotiation, and either both teams make adjustments, or one team decides to make the adjustment. But I think that's a discussion that has to happen at the higher levels, the CXO or VPs. I think people need to get into a room, and maybe you go back to your development team and say, guys, let's think about this. Maybe you make adjustments. But I definitely think that's a negotiation point. I don't know that there's a cold, hard, easy answer, but I think ignoring it isn't going to fix it. Yeah. And it's something that definitely needs to be addressed.
Well, two things. One, Melody asks, could you go back and show the slide, I think it's the second to last slide, the finding success one?
Oh, yeah. The sunshine one?
Yes. And then while she's looking at that, Sam asked, in your opinion, how often should a team review their charter? Whenever a new person joins a team, or every couple months? What was your thought there?
The charting process, if it's done right, is very expensive, or it can be very expensive. I do it either, I like to do it every 6 months, between 6 months and a year, or if the team gets to really feeling stale, and you'll know when you get there. If you're an agile team, you'll go into your retro, and everybody there won't be anything to say, or if you do, actually, he's right. If you have a big turnaround, if you've got a team of 8 people and 4 of them are switched out, or you get, 2 or 3 new people in, that's a really great time to recharter your team, because there's enough new minds there that you want to make sure that everybody feels like they're a part of the team, which is something I didn't touch on, which is making sure doing everything you can to make sure everybody is bought into your culture. And if you involve everybody in that charting process, they have a piece of it. And so they're going to carry it with them. And they're going to, as new people come in, they're going to help indoctrinate the new people into your culture. There's a long answer to a short question.
It's a good answer. Another one from Jax. You mentioned working with offshore developers. What are some challenges working with teams with very disparate cultures and economic pressures?
That is actually really interesting. So our offshore team, I work with, I'm an offshore team, and they are contractors. So that's a double whammy. The team I work, the contracting team I work for, their culture is very much don't ask questions, just do it. Kind of don't show any weakness. So you have to be super interactive. You have to take that into consideration building a culture. It's taken us a couple years. I'm actually the liaison between the offshore team and our onshore teams. And I have a special meeting just with them. And I've spent a lot of time working with them to get them comfortable with asking questions and being more in line with our culture. And that, it's okay to do certain things. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work, but you got to do it. So hopefully that was an appropriate answer.
Yeah. I don't see any others in the chat, but one more. Oh, Jack said, thank you for that answer. One more that was one from me is I really appreciate how sometimes the real quick and dirty makes sense for a team, and then but other times it doesn't. Do you have any thoughts on situations where you had developers working where one method really made sense, like they were in a startup phase getting going, and it's fine to have all these bugs and not a lot of tests, and then it shifts and those developers start feeling defensive of, oh, you're telling me I was doing things wrong?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think if there's a shift, then that's a really fabulous time to charter, and really encourage, those developers they're either going to fit in the new world or they're not. And then you make some tough decisions. Hopefully I'm answering your question appropriately. You can take those developers and move them into a team if that's the way they want to work. If that's the way they're comfortable working, then move them in a team that is, quick and dirty, or work with them to help them feel like they're part of the new culture. A lot of times that happens, I think, when people start feeling alienated, that the world has changed and left them behind. I've seen that. And if nobody's making an effort to bring them up into the new world, they feel left behind. It makes them defensive. It makes them cranky. Now, something that I've experienced is being in a more careful culture and then having to step sideways and do something quick and dirty, in which case I pulled my team together and I said, look, we got to do this thing. So we're going to make a modification temporarily, and we're just going to make ourselves this kind of quick and dirty team, and we're going to accept what happens for what it is. And we're not going to worry about it, and then we're going to move forward. So I think the biggest thing is just addressing those issues. We like to sort of pretend, even when things have changed, we like to pretend we're still maintaining the status quo. And that, I think, is where the rubber, or that's where the train leaves the tracks every time. It's pretending it's okay when it's just not.